With March Madness finally beginning, the world of sports focuses on 64 different colleges, all trying to win a Division I basketball championship. March Madness brings in millions of viewers and millions of dollars in advertisements and sponsorships. With all this money being generated by unpaid student athletes, the topic of whether or not student athletes should be compensated often becomes a hot button issue. I firmly believe that college athletes deserve adequate compensation for their athletic efforts. In a perfect world, athletes would want to participate in their sport simply for a scholarship and for the love of the game. However, when the NCAA produces nearly $11 billion in revenue due to college sports, which is more than the NBA and the NHL, the people that are producing this astronomical amount of money deserve to be compensated. However, this money is simply used to create mega stadiums and salary increases for coaches and administrators. In 2014, the University of Alabama reported $143.4 million in athletic revenues, which is more than all NHL teams and 25 of the 30 NBA teams. None of this money goes to any of Alabama's student athletes, while Alabama's head football coach, Nick Saban, recently signed a contract that will give him $6.9 million. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a star for UCLA, was quoted saying, "Despite the hours I put in every day practicing, learning plays, and traveling around the country to play games, and despite the millions of dollars our team generated for UCLA, both in cash and in recruiting students to attend the university, I was always too broke to do much but study, practice, and play." It is completely unfair that the NCAA is making billions of dollars off of these athletes' efforts, while many of these athletes are living in poverty. Without these student athletes, on the field or on the court, the billions of dollars created by collegiate athletics simply wouldn't exist. In addition to the billions of dollars student athletes generate, there is a belief that success in college sports improves the application rates and caliber of students admitted. During Georgetown star Patrick Ewing's 1982 to 1983 season, the school's admissions rate increased by 47% and an average 40-point rise in freshman SAT scores. Another reason student athletes should be compensated is because they put their bodies on the line each game they play. Many people remember seeing Kevin Ware break his leg in the 2013 NCAA tournament. Ware luckily healed in 6 months and began practicing, but many players aren't that lucky. It's unfortunately not uncommon for players to become paralyzed by hits or tackles. To make matters worse, if a student athlete can no longer compete due to an injury, they oftentimes lose their scholarship and their chance at an education. The NCAA's catastrophic injury relief only applies when medical expenses exceed $90,000, which often doesn't happen. If a student athlete's medical expenses are only $80,000, the NCAA will not help pay for it, leaving the student with an $80,000 medical bill and a potentially lost scholarship. On average, a full Division I scholarship is $25,000, which seems like a lot of money, but it really only covers the basics. It covers tuition, housing, a meal plan, and multiple $100 textbooks. If players come from a low-income household, they might get a few $100s from Pell Grants, which enable them to occasionally buy real food instead of living off ramen and Hot Pockets. Contrary to what some believe, being a student athlete is a full-time job. A typical Division I college football player devotes 43.3 hours per week, which is 3.3 more hours than a typical American work week. On a typical day, a player will wake up before classes, get a lift or conditioning session in, go to class until 3 or 4 p.m., go to practice, and finally go to a mandatory study hall, which leaves them little time to do anything, especially work a job. So basically, student athletes are working like they have a full-time job, but make $0. This is the most difficult part of the paying student athletes argument. How should we fairly distribute the money? Many people agree that student athletes deserve compensation, but they have no idea how to implement this. When the NCAA was created in 1906, the founders had no idea how large sports would become. The rules they implemented were designed for that time and that caliber of amateur sport. Now that it is the 21st century and college sports is a billion-dollar industry, it's time to make some rule changes, one of which is allowing players to receive compensation. For starters, I believe that athletes should be allowed to receive any endorsements they can obtain. For example, if Nike wants to offer a contract to Jameis Winston when he is still in college, why shouldn't he be allowed to sign it? According to the NCAA rulebook, Jameis wouldn't be allowed to sign because he is already under contract with the NCAA for $0. I also believe that student athletes should receive around $2,000 per semester through a weekly allowance. This not only gives student athletes spending money, as well as some early experience managing their own money. Athletes earn their schools hundreds of thousands of dollars, increase enrollment, and if they perform well, provide a recruiting piece for years. Based on all these things they do for their universities and all the work they put into their respective sports, I believe that student athletes deserve compensation.